All right. Hope this is better. Yeah, I'm getting sound, or at least I'm getting sound on my end. Please give me a thumbs up, guys. Yeah, a little later than we wanted to. Okay. Here we go. Let's hope that's things are solved. Yes. Yay! All right. Welcome once again. Had a little problem there to Tips and Tricks Tuesday. I'm DBJ, your host for RPG with DBJ. Go through the preamble. I have the PDF for Invisible Sun. I know there's some controversy about its price. The physical books being physical box, the black box from Monte Cook Games being $250-ish US and weighs like 35 pounds or so. So not sure. I did get a couple of yeses for doing a page through, like a review, because I've seen people play the game and not quite impressed by that. I've seen people unbox the game and then not really show you what's in it. And then I've seen lots of people complain about the price of the game and the fact that it's kind of a luxury item and that kind of thing. I don't want to get too deep into it, but Invisible Sun is a 35-pound black box of one of the most expensive and largest and fully physical RPG games ever created. It's got 4 thick books over 600 pages. It has over 1,000 cards, tokens, multiple maps, soft cloth maps, handouts. It's dice, whatever. It's got everything in it, and so the price point is prohibitive for most people to play the game. But now that it's available in PDF, even though the PDF is like $100 US, it's still prohibitive. But there's also people who just are hating on it just because of the price point, as opposed to saying, like, I guess it's the equivalent of hating on like a Porsche or a Lamborghini or like a Bentley or something. It's like, it's hideously expensive, but if you don't know what it's about, you can't really make a comment. So I was thought about doing a review on it. And the other thing is that there was an idea of Vince came up with an idea of doing like world building by theme. So I'm not sure if anyone would be interested in that. Like we did world building by classes, like character classes. We did world building by time periods, but theme would be like comedies, romantic comedies, noir, horror, action, spy thriller, drama, that kind of thing. So I'm not sure if anyone would be interested in that. Bruce says, I have to admit that it is a prohibitive price point for me. No matter if I wanted to support it, I'd really like to know, though, because I actually do. Yeah, that's why I got it, and I wanted to find out more. I don't know anything, and before I make before I pass judgment on something I don't know about, I thought I would take a look at it. And I could buy a giant black box that's 250 pounds of RPG content, but I don't have a gaming group, so it would just be this black box sitting there. So I thought, yeah, Bruce's theme might be fun. I'd be up for that. Yeah, Deadman says same here. Okay, same here. Same here for Invisible Sun or thematic world building. Specifically Deadman, because I'm not sure when it popped into the chat. The chat is always a little bit behind, so just let me know. But I will. Today was about dice fudging. It's a thing that comes up. It's like one of the top 10 reoccurring. It's like a comet, right, that passes by every once in a while. It's one of the top 10 trigger things in the RPG community and thematic world building. Okay, thank you very much. And so I thought I'd bring up dice fudging and the fact that we have tools that are already available for us that is a far more mature form of doing it. And yeah, Ricker says, wait, what, you don't have a gaming group? Yeah, my gaming group, real life. is basically the way to put it. Yeah, real life. That's exactly what happened. Uh, it's like a number of people, all with disparate locations and yeah, it's real life. Yeah, kids, jobs, locations, travel, all that. Yeah, all that. Just hey, I'm going to buy a house. Great. Where is it? Oh, it's like 45 minutes away. All right. Well, okay, maybe we can. And then it's like, no, my weekends are tapped. And then it's like, oh, after work. And then it's the whole thing. It's just life. um, Ricker says, is it me or is the camera sharper than normal in a good way? Oh, thanks. Maybe. Let's see if yeah, it's showing all the grays, every single one of them. Look at that. That's crazy. Oh man, I'm an old grognard. Anyway, let's get into dice fudging. Okay, so my problem with dice fudging is not the fact that it's done, and it's not the fact that people talk about it. It's that there are other things before you get to the point where you want to fudge dice. There are far too many skill sets that we can use before we even start getting into fudging dice. And that often is not talked about. When I say fudging dice, I'm including, because Dead Man brings up the fact of like changing hit points on the fly, or ability scores, or armor class, or all those kind of things on the fly. I'm including that, and we're going to talk about that as well. Yeah, I think maybe when I started the stream, I don't know. I went into Windows and checked my audio, maybe something with the video or whatever. I hope it lasts because I don't change things at all. All right, so here's the deal. When it comes to fudging dice, what is fudging dice? Basically, it is universally, we know that when players fudge dice, we feel like it's cheating, right? A player who, if you're rolling for attributes or something randomly, and the player like wants to re-roll or snatch the dice up because they look too low, or a player during the game wants to cast a spell or shoot the bad guy in the back of the head, or do a backflip off of a scaffolding or something like that, and they make a saving throw to dodge out of the way of the exploding fireball. They go to roll, and guess what? They don't like what they've rolled. They snatch the dice up, and then they somehow want to re-roll or whatever. And we collectively say that's wrong. Yet on the Dungeon Master side, the GM side, the storyteller side, it's Ricker says a player fudging dice is saying they don't trust to do their job, though, and which I agree. But then when the DM does the same thing, they roll for an attack against a player, they roll for their monsters, they have their things set up, and then they change it. And strangely enough, this is not what's talked about very often, but a lot of DMs will not want to kill their players. So instead of, they've rolled a crit, but they say that it isn't, they roll for damage, but they reduce the amount of damage done. They roll for the number of enemies if it's like random, but they, instead of 87 enemies, they only say there's like 12, or things like that. And the issue comes about where if the DM is changing the die rolls, some people feel that they are stealing the randomized aspect of the game and basically railroading what they want to happen. So if the players are, I don't know, they're going down into a deep dungeon and there are dark elves surrounding them, and the player's like, hey, I'm going to sneak away so I'm not captured. And the dungeon master really wants to capture all the players. They roll some dice. The dice do not say what they want. Instead, they say, okay, they got a 20 and they capture you, or they see you in the shadows or something like that, right? Rickard says, I think it stems from what you view the DM's role as. If you are only going by dice, why do you need a DM? Exactly. Or the opposite, if you're going to say what's going to happen, why, if you're going to roll the dice and then interpret or change the die rolls, why bother rolling in the first place? So, which both of them run counter to each other, and as usual, I'm an extreme moderate. I'm right down the middle. So here's the deal. For me, they're like the top 3 things that you can do before it gets to the point where you want to start fudging dice. And I feel okay. Let me just say one more thing. I think the desire to fudge the dice is a fear of the outcome of what the dice produce, and someone snatches up the dice and starts rolling them before considering accepting what the dice say on any side of the table, right? So, for example, a player character wants to snatch up the dice and attack an enemy. Let's say there's a big dragon. And before considering the fact that maybe their 3rd level character could never even take on a dragon, they start rolling dice and I want to attack this thing. And the game master's thinking, well, I just wanted the dragon to fly by and create this story element. But the player now wants to engage this far superior enemy that's basically going to stomp and kill their player character. It's does the DM accept the fact that this is what's going to happen, that the players just basically they know because the DM has this information that they're going to die, or that the player is willing to accept the fact that they're going to fight something that maybe they cannot survive, right? Prue says, I haven't GM'd enough to know what my actual practice is, but I haven't fudged a die roll yet. I've been close enough to want to do that. I don't have a rock hard stance against it anymore. And Rickard says, because you as a DM moderate the game, you interpret the dice, you don't follow the dice. And so my top 3, I don't want to call them fudging dice because it just sounds bad. My top 3 alternatives to fudging the dice, let's go through them. Yeah, but Prue says, I'd rather find ways around fudging if I can. Yes, and as a matter of fact, there's a number of games that deal with this fact. So here's the first thing. The first alternative to fudging dice, and that is this: don't roll the dice. Just don't do it. As a player, don't be so quick to snatch up the dice and start rolling them. And as a DM, don't roll the dice. Here's what I mean. If the outcome is if you've already decided what the outcome is, don't bother rolling the dice, because then you're asking for success or failure. Here's what I mean. And I'm going to give you a situation. Players go into a small town. They haven't been there before. It's a medieval town. There's chickens running around. There's a bunch of orphan kids. There's people selling things in a stall. There's some guards that, are rather rude, and they're inspecting people's goods and wares. And the PCs come into this small town, and they come into the city gates. The DM says, you know what? I'm going to have one of the kids pickpocket someone and run off, and this is what's going to start the adventure, right? The PCs see this happening, and as the DM, Ricker says, if failure or success doesn't add anything to the game, don't give that outcome a chance to occur. Exactly. So here's the situation. You as a DM want the players to follow a small kid, I don't know, orphan pickpocket, and when they follow the kid, it pulls them into the adventure. And then you say, hey everyone, make a perception roll. And here we go. We start down the deep dive of, wow, 6 of us rolled and we all failed, right? And then it's like, well, if you were going to give them this information, small pickpocket kid steals something from rich noble and runs off in down a dark alley, don't roll for it. Just assume professionalism, right? In other words, PC see what's going on. Don't bother rolling for it. Give them the information. If you as a game master are trying to impart some form of information, they see something, they overhear something, a an enemy is performing something in the shadows, or the PCs need to question people as they walk around the city, investigating some dark cult or something. Give them the information and assumed professionalism, right? So, or in other words, uh, take 10, or in other words, passive skill rolls, or whatever name you want to call it, right? If your ranger or your paladin or your cleric or your rogue in your game is assumed to have connections or knowledge or perception of things, give it to them. Let the rogue see the kid that's the pickpocket, right? That's their skill set. There's a fight happening in a tavern. Let the fighter know that these people aren't very good and they're drunk and whatnot, and he drops something out of his pockets or something. Prue says, this is where I like to use passive skills. Right. Whatever. It doesn't matter what game you're playing. Player characters have skills, and 99.9% of us have passive skills. Those of us who drive to work have passive driving skill, right? How many times do we make a driving roll? Well, when a kid drops a ball in the street, or traffic stops and hard brakes ahead of you, sure, you've made your driving roll, but more or less we have our passive driving skill, right? We have our passive cooking skills, and et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, whatever the average is of your game, assume every single player has the average of every single one of their skills, and stop. They are good at what they do. Give it to them. If failure and success is not going to change the outcome, then give it to them. Prue says, I've had enemies arrive in groups and then skip the group if the players were in too much trouble during a non-essential combat. I'd rather not have a TPK that happened because of my inexperience. I absolutely. Foolish Kiwi says, I personally use those spot checks as more of a bonus. Like, the ambush was going to happen anyway, but the spot check may give them a heads up on a few of the bogeys, or they have enough info to solve the puzzle, but a spot check might help them find a clue. And Prue says, there's always a PC that is more alert than the others as a baseline, or more charming or strong. So my first hint is, don't bother rolling. If it's not going to move or change or push the story forward, and the outcome is already predicted, just don't have them roll. If the king is going to give them equipment to go on an adventure, or if the sage is going to hand them over the information that they want, don't bother rolling. But as Foolish Kiwi and Prue are kind of hinting in, hey, Mythos, here's the other thing. If you're going to roll and you've already predetermined the outcome, for example, they are in a marketplace and they're going to find some equipment. They've spoken to a sage that will give them the knowledge. They've spoken to a criminal that will be threatened in a back alley and give them information. How about, hey, Fat Ninja DM, always with the cup of coffee. Yeah, right. Here's the thing. Allow the die roll. We've already determined that there will be success, and then have the die roll determine how much more successful they are in a given situation. So, for example, there might be the orphan kid steals a purse from a noble and runs down an alley. Okay, this is what they automatically see. This is the information you're giving them. This is what pulls them into the adventure. But the die roll may give them more information, such as they see that they're being watched by the city guard who lets it happen, or there are 3 people hiding in the shadows with blades glinting from the sunlight, right? Or they see that a shop owner has allowed the child to run in the back of their shop and pull the curtain closed and let the child run away, right? You're giving this information. Maybe the child drops a map, after stealing the purse, and accidentally drops a map, right? So you've already determined that they're going to succeed in this thing. But the die roll, based on how low or how high the die roll is, creates other things. For example, maybe they make a die roll and the die roll's terrible, but you still want them to see the kid steal the purse. So they see the kid steal the purse, but then the city guard steps in the player character's way, and they're like, where are you running there, citizen? Right? Like, and this might create a complication. They've got the information. You already decided they're going to get this information, but you've created a complication because of their low die roll. So maybe the city guard gets in the way, or the criminal cut purses that run this place assume the player characters are infringing on their territory, right? They're like, we steal purses here, not you guys. It could be mistaken identity. And a young lady is like, I can't believe you left me, or something, right? Maybe there's a gentleman that's like, you owe me money, whatever. And it's like, mistaken, who, what the hell? That kind of thing. Hey, Fat Ninja, thanks. So die rolls may give more knowledge, a heads up, like Foolish Kiwi talks about having a heads up on an ambush, right? The player characters know they're being ambushed, but this gives them, maybe they find out that there's a path on the way out, or the ambush wasn't really set up by professional ambushers. Maybe they notice that these people are hungry and starving, or the ambush was set up for the King's Guard and not necessarily the players. Or the ambush was set up to trap an animal and not the player characters, or something like that. So Prue says maybe they don't see the theft, but a bystander does and alerts them, right? Exactly. Mythos says, I'm learning so much from you, TBJ. Can't wait to apply these things. Thanks a lot, but not necessarily me. It's all of us, man. Foolish Kiwi says, also, I tend to give tall tales or semi-false information on closely failed knowledge checks based on the character's background. If they work for the church and fail identifying a scary spell, I may tell them it appears to be a type of forbidden magic, even if it isn't, because they think it might be. And Prue says, this is where I like random NPCs to sometimes step in and look alive. And what for Foolish Kiwi is basically saying is, it's the unreliable narrator. I love unreliable narrators. Unreliable narrators are excellent to throw into a game. It's the village people that say they're being attacked by lizard people, right? But they could be lizard folk, they could be dragonborn, they could be troglodytes, they could be Yuan-Ti, they could be Naga. It's like people giving information from the point of view of the individuals and not us, the players, is a great way to give off information that may or may not be accurate, but the player characters could piece things together, right? Someone says, my child is being possessed by a demon, might be like, well, maybe it was a charm spell, maybe it really was a demon, maybe it was a ghost, maybe it was them, an awakened sorcerer, maybe they've joined a druidic cult, and maybe they're suffering from lycanthropy. Like, when someone says things, the information they're giving may be colored by the NPC's own experiences. Maybe they're shop owner and they hate thieves that are stealing their fruits and veggies. So every time something happens, they're assuming that it's a thief stealing fruits and veggies, right? It's from their own point of view. So Foolish Kiwi says quote, as far as I can deduce, it is soul magic, etc. Right. The church is always going to color things from their point of view. It's always going to be colored in for or against the faith, or knowledge that the faith has uncovered over the centuries, right? It's not going to be colored by common sense or criminality, unless the church is part of that, right? Prue says, I love it, Kiwi. I have a player who does this on his own with his own character, and it's the best. It's a good player tip that I haven't seen anyone do as a player tip video before. I love when players, as a GM or DM, you give them information and then the player changes it based on the player's point of view. I love when people are proactive like that. I've done that plenty of times where someone's like, oh, it's an ogre. And then like me as a player character was like, they were giants and they were like 50 feet tall. It's like, no, they weren't. They're like 9 feet, but whatever, right? Wives' tales. That's how tall tales begin. So Foolish Kiwi says that's a great example of a closely failed knowledge check. Mythos, yeah. He says maybe the kid has seizures, but parents thinks it's possession. Exactly, and why not, right? Sometimes red herrings are great, and a red herring doesn't necessarily need to be a lie, right? Right, dead man. I mean, exactly. You can impart information, player characters investigate it, and then they go, oh well, that's not exactly what happened, but maybe that then leads to something else. For example, a kid that has seizures but the parents think it's possession, maybe another relative is folding their arms and they're like, I knew this was just a medical thing, but no one's listening to that parent. And then that parent pulls the PCs aside and is like, listen, so and so, this is what's going on, and here's some coin, and could you investigate this thing? And it may lead into other aspects of your game. And whereas maybe the bad guys are being blamed for something that they don't have anything to do with, or and it's always great to do those things. And by the way, we are talking about fudging dice, right? A failed roll does not necessarily mean someone doesn't come up with the information, but comes up with the information in the incorrect order, or a misperceived method. The possession versus a seizure, right? They still got the knowledge. They just got the knowledge in a strange manner, or they interpreted it incorrectly. Yeah. Proof says, I didn't know the term, but I love it. Unreliable narrator. That was the name of the concept. Yes. The unreliable narrator is a storytelling method expertly used by George R.R. Martin for Game of Thrones. The books are told through the eyes of individuals, and those narrators are the ones who are shaping what they see. So one narrator may look at Cersei as this great queen mother, whereas another narrator looks at her as a conniving bitch or something like that, right? One person looks at the mountain and is like, he's the greatest warrior ever, and another person looks at the mountain as a rapist and a murderer, and so Mythos says the Elder Scrolls abuse the unreliable narrator. Yeah, and Charlie, hey, hello there, haven't seen you before. Says it can be a narrator that is deluded or actively lying to the reader, exactly, or lying to themselves, right? An unreliable narrator doesn't necessarily know they're unreliable as well. They just, again, if they're not a warrior, or they're not an adventurer, or they're not a noble, or they're not a scientist, they're not a pilot, they're going to see things from their own point of view, from their own experiences, right? And so they're going to do those things. Rickard says, I would say there is a difference between third-person limited and an unreliable narrator, and I agree with you that way as well. A third-person limited, what Rickard is saying is that a third-person limited, it isn't deducing the reader or the person experiencing it, but it's almost like watching something from a drone, right? They're looking at things from above without bringing into it their own perceptions, but they're also not flavoring anything by experience. So that would be like saying, there are three men in the alley wearing dark clothes. One of them has their hand behind their back. Another is saying words, and there is an individual who's sweating and fearful for their life, right? You're not specifically saying they're being threatened by thugs. The third person limited is describing the actions, and then the reader interprets those actions by themselves without coloring it. Charlie says, people nowadays talk about seeing ghosts. They aren't informed enough to know their house is settling in the ground, so they hear noises and assume it must be a spirit of a grandma, for example. Yeah, exactly. Tesla Ranger even brings up a Rashomon. one murder or several contradictory accounts on how it happened. And exactly. And so using that as like fudging the dice isn't necessarily fudging the die roll, but what you're doing is you're shaping the narrative. I'm using positive words here. You're not lying to your players. You're giving them information based on high or low rolls as opposed to fudging the dice. So here's another. Yeah, Fat Ninja D. Welcome to the club, Charlie. That's Charlie to you there, dude. Anyway, here's another method of so-called fudging the dice, or what we do before we start fudging the dice. So one thing is don't bother rolling the die. The second technique is, if you're going to bother having them roll the dice, but you've already determined they're going to get what they're going to get, shape what they're going to get by giving them limited or more information, or giving them limited or more access. For example, someone makes a charisma roll to or whatever game system you're using, but we're going to default to D&D here, right? Someone makes a charisma like persuasion roll or deception roll or intimidation roll to get something from a shop owner or intimidate someone. You could also say, well, you intimidate the pickpocket, but then the pickpocket later sells that information to someone else. Or the shop owner gives you a discount on selling you wares, but then after you leave, they immediately go to the city guard. You make a charisma check to get some kind of information from one of your connections, but then that connection then feels guilty about giving you the information and runs to their local church. You could, the person succeeds, but then you just complicate the success or what I'm going to say, failure of the role. So the charismatic paladin goes into the town and rolls a 3 on a charisma check to get into the city, get past the city guard, and the city guard looks him up and down and goes, yeah, sure, you can come on in here. And then the city guard looks at each other like, I think we need to tell somebody that, this paladin came into the town, right? It's not the no, you can't come in. It's the, well, you've already said they're going to come in anyway, but they're like suspicious. Like, no, we need to put some guards on them, have them followed, Mytho says, but if they roll a nat 20, maybe not have a bad outcome. Of course, it is modulating the roll based on what they've done, even if you feel like failure is going to close the door. And that's one issue when it comes to fudging dice, I think, is why someone who has inexperience, or I'm going to say maybe immaturity in gaming, is having a closed door, a closed gate or closed door. And what I mean by that, yeah, Prue says, I love using tiered info for die rolls and die results. I absolutely agree with you. And I think what happens for us sometimes, and I know till today, I still get caught into it. Mythos says, have many doors. An example would be player characters come to city. City has a big wall around it, is well protected. Characters must enter into city. Without thinking, you say, okay, make a die roll to get past the guards. Every character fails their roll, whether it's sneaking past the guards or convincing the guards to let them through the front gates, right? So now you close the door. It's the classic, back in old D&D first and second edition gaming, there were modules that if you didn't see the secret door, you didn't get to go into the rest of the dungeon. Or there was remember, there, if some of you are old enough, there was a stat where you rolled a d6 to open stuck or barred doors, or you had if you had 18 / percentile strength, you had a bend bars lift gates thing. And if you couldn't open the door or lift the gate or break down the door or find the secret door or concealed door, you didn't go into the rest of the adventure. And what happens there is what the hell? Sorry. I normally silence my phone. So normally what ends up happening is you as DM go, okay, I have a secret door, and I'm going to say, hey guys, make a roll to see if you find it. Perception rolls, investigate rolls go out, and then failure. Now what? Right? So it's like, well, now you're like, well, now do I fudge the dice so that they find it anyway? And they've already made the rolls, and the highest roll was like a 5 on a d20, including bonuses. And that's where we have a closed door. There's no other option. They have to find the secret door to go into the dungeon. They missed the roll. What happens? So my thing is have plenty of doors, right? Not physical doors. Have plenty of options for them to Oh man, thanks for the chat. Nice job with the phone, dummy. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So thanks for the tip and the put down, man. Right. Vince says, fail forward. Make sure use of the failure to move the plot along. Maybe they stumble through the hidden door instead of finding it regularly. Exactly. Foolish Kiwi even says, Rickard said, getting back on topic, the combat is the one area I have not found a good alternative. It's too black and white, and I've had too many expectations from the players to have a good alternative. I'm gonna get into that. That's gonna be my third part, right? I absolutely will mention it. Foolish Kiwi says, also avoid using the common 5, 10, 15 on your checks. Yes, it makes math a little less cut and dry, but in my experience, the players really get excited when they realize their role they thought was 2 below passing maybe is giving them more info than they expected. Exactly. Mithu says, I aim to please. Yeah, and call me out too. That's the whole point of us hanging out, right? I don't have all the knowledge. I'm not the best, and don't agree with me. Call me out on my bullshit, right? Just call me out. So anyway, combat. Combat is the one area where you really cannot fudge the dice. You don't want to do that at all, right? But you really can't. Here's what I mean. You can't. It seems like you can't modulate the die rolls, but I'm going to tell you that there is a way to do it. All right. Here's the deal. When it comes to if we know what the motivation of what we're doing in the game is, we can ramp up or ramp down the encounter as we see fit. Here's what I mean. Ramping down really isn't a matter of being kind to your players, but creating a situation where the narration it's like failing forward, right? But in combat. I'm going to give you an example. In The Hobbit, the hobbits end up encountering trolls, and these are trolls where if they see sunlight, they turn to stone. And so they encounter the hobbits. And what happens is the trolls capture the hobbits, tie them up, put them on a spit to cook them. Why didn't the trolls, if this was a game, why didn't the trolls just kill them all, right? The trolls clearly are stronger, and they have enough numbers that they could probably easily kill probably half of them and then just throw the other half in cages or rip their limbs off or whatnot, right? But instead, they were captured. And then the trolls had conflict amongst themselves that one of the PCs, a hobbit and the dwarves, were able to exploit, right? I'm going to give you another example. The frozen world of Hoth. Luke goes into the cave. Luke is out there in the cold, gets smacked in the head, wakes up with his feet frozen on the ceiling because the creature wants to eat him later. Was he killed outright? No. Did the game master kill him and say, well, you just failed your role and you didn't use the force, and because you're a second level character? No, he got opportunity to, use a point of inspiration to draw the lightsaber, to cut his feet out, cuts the creature. Does he kill the creature? No, he cuts his arm off. So what I'm saying is that we could have the 5 PCs surrounded by 13 ogres, and knowing that maybe fighting 13 ogres and 5 PCs that are first level, they'll probably get their ass killed. But if one of the ogres or 2 of the ogres steps forward and is like, I'll take care of this, as they roll the sleeves up and they want to start, pummeling one of the characters, and one of the PCs is like, I'll arm wrestle you or something like that. We can shape the narrative to play with the idea that, as a game master, and this is when you don't want to kill your players, we can play with the idea that we can narrate things to give the players enough time or open up enough doors for them to think of other ways to get out of the situation. Foolish Kiwi says, you don't want to fudge the dice in combat, but you can change the modifiers based on third pillar attributes. That was going to be my thing too. Is the players clamped in the monster's jaws? Well, the chances of hitting it, him being able to hit things in the face is probably really high. I absolutely agree with that, right? It's the classic villain has the PC on their knees. They've got them against the wall. They've got a knife to their throat, and the enemy they drop. Why did my brain stop? They drop their guard, right? They think that they have the PCs at a limitation, and they don't notice things. Oh, we have you now. We have you surrounded. And so what does the bad guy, what does the orc chieftain do? He puts his weapon down and hands it off to the shaman and starts us doing the soliloquy in front of the PCs while the rogue starts slipping a dagger out of their boot, right? It's the like you said, being trapped in the monsters. The player that gets snatched by the alligator in the swamp and pulled down underwater is like, ooh, they're going to die. But the player maybe can stab the thing in the eye. The player can use their power to touch it on the forehead and zap it with their shocking grasp or something. It won't miss it. It's the I'm going to grab a stick and light it on fire and use it as a torch to make the wolves stay away from the camp. Sure, the halfling bard may not be able to fight off 6 wolves, but maybe it kind of makes sense if they've got a torch in their hand. You know what I mean? So, getting back to the chat, Prue says, no worries, we have 10 minutes left, plenty of time to tackle everything about game mechanics. Yeah, exactly, right? Mitho says, in the halfway point in my campaign, I plan on fudging rolls to get my players captured by the coalition and get a massive plot dump. I won't even come to combat. Combat, strange dart in the city could work. I wouldn't. Here's the deal. I wouldn't fudge the dice, and I'm going to say this because I'm going to start to end this a little bit. If you are a game master or dungeon master and you garner trust from your players, and I know this is going to rub some of players, if there's some players listen to this, is going to rub them the wrong way. But hear me out. Have you ever watched a television show where the beginning of the show and the end of the show ends on a cliffhanger? The beginning of the show begins with in media res and it ends on a cliffhanger. Here's what I mean. Most of the time we allow our game masters to start our game so that we are in the action. I contend to you that game masters are allowed to end things in the action. Let me give you an example. Player characters, guys, we're going to start the adventure. You wake up on a beach of a deserted island. Off in the distance, you see the sailing ship that you were on sinking into the waters. On the beach are all of your belongings, treasure chests and your equipment and stuff. You've had a 3 weeks travel on the open seas and storm-tossed seas, and you've come to the island. What I just did is I didn't let them roll a damn thing. I said, listen, this is how the adventure starts. We also have the tool to end our games that way. So what Mythos is talking about in terms of being captured by the coalition, here's the deal. End the game on a cliffhanger by saying, okay, you've defeated the enemy, you're going down the pathway, and boom, out of the crowd, out of the woods comes the enemy and they surround you with guns or arrows or something like that, and you're captured. Now, am I taking away some of the player agency? Yeah, I am. But if I've gathered enough trust from my players, they'll know that for just this slight moment, I'm taking away their agency to give them the option of having further adventures so that they gain their agency back, right? So, for example, I could end an adventure where I'm just making this up, right? You go into the castle and storm the castle to defeat the enemy, and you've defeated the vampire lord, right? And in one round, they blast my vampire lord, and I'm just rolling my eyes like, damn, I thought this was going to be more, a better adventure. Vampire lord goes down, and all of a sudden, I say, a dark portal opens up and a demonic hand reaches out, and you feel a cold wind flow over you and darkness surrounds you, and suddenly all of you, everyone disappears from the room, and suddenly everything goes quiet. And then I fold the book and that's the end of the game. And they're just like, what the hell just happened? Right now I'm saying, yeah, I'm taking away your agency because I'm furthering your story. I'm letting you go forward into the story. Maybe they drop into another realm. Maybe they want to be recruited by whoever created this vampire lord. Maybe they're summoned by a spell from an evil mage, or whatever the case may be. All I'm doing is I'm ending the game. I'm wrapping it up. I'm hitting I'm hitting the cliffhanger. And then the next time we start, what I do, my promise to the players is I'm going to give them agency to get out of the situation, right? I'm not going to make sure everything's taken away. I'm not going to make sure that, that they can't act when the game starts again. It's my promise. It's my role as the game master or storyteller or GM or DM or what have you to keep the game rolling. And so my promise is, while I take agency from you, I'm also going to give you plenty of agency back. If I'm going to capture PCs, and we've done the prison escape thing before, right? If you're going to capture them, let them get their shit back, right? Don't do the whole you're naked and you have to find a way out, unless you've already talked with your players that that's exactly the kind of game they want. Let their stuff be in a closet, or let one of the guards be picking their teeth with the paladin's holy avenger or something. So when they get out of the cage, they go and punch and kick and whatever. They sneak around, they get their shit back together. They get out of there. They let them have their stuff back, right? Let them be the professionals that they are, because you've already taken away the agency that they should have had when you took it away the previous game, right? And Mythos says, and reassure them they will get their agency back. Exactly. Maybe they are captured and there's someone else in the prison, in the jail cell, that can give them further information, which is what pushes the story forward, right? It's those kind of things. Prue says, this is hinging on the fact that they don't feel like you have a tendency to railroad them, right? But as long as they don't feel that, you should be good. And that's exactly right. You don't want to continually railroad them while you're doing this. You want to say, listen, I'm going to take the agency, and then at the same time, you want to give them as much agency as possible during the game, because then that way they trust you and they go, you know what? That sounds like a cool thing, man. Oh man, we got snatched to another world. That's great. Some players are into that kind of thing, Foolish Kiwi says the capture thing is also a good way to DM fiat an accidental total party kill. It's like, quote, oh, look, they didn't kill you. Oh, you all wake up in this carnage. And listen, in the rules, I'm going to point this out in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. When a creature is taken, and I'm presuming this is for PC, when you're taken to 0 hit points, you are either killed or taken out of combat. You are knocked unconscious. Same thing could be with being captured, right? PCs surround an enemy, they take them down to 0 hit points. They don't have to be killed outright. Same thing with the PCs, that kind of thing. So, right, Mythos says, or a hidden spy who's loyal to the players. Exactly. Or they find they get captured and they find out there's an enemy rebel cell and one of these people has been captured or something. Yeah, absolutely. So guys, we've hit the hour mark. We're talking about fudging dice. Just wanted to give about 3 or 4 or 8 or 15 different things by myself and those in the chat. Other methods of just don't change the die rolls, come up with some new ideas. So guys, everybody have a great one. I will see thee tomorrow, and hopefully the stream will come out all right then. See you. Bye. Hey, baby.